Hello and welcome to another edition of A Lot Beneath the Soil. I am James Lott Jr. here on JLJ Media. I'm the JLJ of JLJ Media, of course, and we're literally talking about the soil on some level today, which I'm very excited. Our ecosystems are in trouble. I mean, our ecology is in trouble, and there are people in certain industries who are working to change that, to make it better. And the farm and ag industry, of course, because it is about soil and crops and the ground that we're on, they are doing things to put things in place to make a change happen. Like you saw if you saw the title, talking about carbon markets, recon ag stuff, we're gonna talk about this. This guy does this stuff. He has a soil, make sure I get his title correct. He's a soil health services lead at Lando Lakes, at Turturra, in Minneapolis, which is a place that I love. I love going over that family there. I love going over there. And I've known him for 10,000 years, so I guess you get a chance to reconnect with him and talk about his work. Nick Reinke, how are you, Nick?
Doing well, James. Good to see you again, man.
Yeah, good to see you too. I knew you when you didn't have a full beard. I was going to say, my beard wasn't gray. That's how I knew you.
Yeah, the years, they go by.
Yes, they go by. So, folks, we met at an agribusiness conference I used to run, and I used to run all over the country, including Bismarck, North Dakota, which Nick, I loved it there. I had a great time. Both times I went, I had a great time there. I had some nice food, and it was very different than Los Angeles or San Francisco. I really liked that part of the world and North Dakota. Do you miss North Dakota at all?
I do and I don't, in the sense that I love getting back there for the farm. So I get back there in the fall to help with harvest and absolutely love my family and love the people there. But I tell you, I like getting out in the broader world too, and kind of connecting the two worlds. So that's the side that I really like, being out in the broader farm economy, but just broader global space, right? Talking about impacts that agriculture has on the world and the way the world views agriculture. It's really fun to kind of get out in that conversation as somebody that comes from there.
Did you ever think that when you were growing up on a farm in North Dakota, did you think you could be out in the broader world? Like, like here in places like LA or New York, the coast and stuff, we know that there's other stuff out there you can get somewhere else. But do you know that when you were growing up? Did you know that?
I always felt at the same time really at home on the farm and totally out of place, if that makes sense. So there was this component that I always had, this sort of a wanderlust to get out there, see the broader world, endlessly curious. But the short answer is really no, right? I didn't see getting out in the broader world. And it's a little bit just, you kind of know what you see, right? So your world starts out very small, and I think that's natural for everybody. You know your local influences. And then as you get out and grow and explore and become more curious and learn more, your just circle expands. So your circle of reference, your frame of reference, but also your circle of potential influence. And as that expands, you start to see these new possibilities you'd never realized. But I mean, it took me, 10 years or so professionally, once I was already into my quote unquote adult career, before I really broke out of sort of that North Dakota paradigm and started working in what I would call the broader world. So it took a while, and it took just that time for that circle of reference to increase.
Now, you decided to go into the insurance side of things. You come from actual farms and farming, and that's, and like me, I grew up with farms in my family, and we were always shocked when I can ride horses. I know how to milk cows, and like, how you not doing that? So I had family at farms. I mean, I had family from this, but ours was from the South. They had farms in the South. So, but I said I knew I used to grow up doing this kind of stuff, and my grandmother had a garden 10 blocks away from me. She brought the South with her, and I learned how to pick, harvest things and pick. I have a garden in my house, my yard. I kind of brought it with, just that it never leaves you. But you went into the insurance industry part of this. What led you into the insurance part of this?
Yeah, insurance and banking are really deep, close personal relationships that I saw on the farm growing up. I mean, on the farm, you've got your trusted advisors, right? So a farmer just kind of needs to be a general manager or a CEO in a way of their operation, and they need to externalize these reference points, whether it's, crop insurance advisory, banking and finance, or working with agronomists and crop scientists and folks like that, right? So I really appreciated the relationship that I saw, my dad have with his local insurance guy. I mean, that guy just swing out and sit down and, have a pop at the shop and talk about what's happening in crop insurance and on the farm. And yeah, it was just a really cool relationship. So it was a place where I saw that, I could go out, get educated, get into the professional world, and yet still be connected with the farm in a really meaningful way. And as much as I like being on the farm, I didn't necessarily see myself as a farmer, where my dad and my brother, very much through and through, their home and their place is on the farm. And I guess I was a little black sheep that way, just a little, I didn't quite fit. My whole family still doesn't quite understand what I do. So It's fun to get back for the holidays and try and talk about this stuff. Yeah. But it was a way to stay close.
But in a way, it's they don't realize it's connected to them. It's there. You're out there trying to figure out ways to protect the farm, protect the dairy farms, the vegetable farms, the turkey ranches. You're working all that stuff, and that's what you're. So it's like, folks, I'm still related to you guys. I mean, I'm related to you too, but I'm still related to you guys. Just like I said, banking and insurance, that's very important to farms, and wineries and all that stuff, any kind of agriculture business. I mean, it's very important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a key part.
Yeah. There's regulations, there's all kinds of stuff, there's laws, all kinds of things that go on. You have to be on top of all the time to make sure that nothing is going the way it shouldn't be going. You want to make sure you're always on top of stuff. Also, folks, he's very tall. I was going to tell you something. I'm tall. I thought I was tall. Then I met him, and he's super tall. That's another thing about Nick that I always remember. That you're super tall, and he must have stood out anyway. Just like you probably got asked so many times once you're playing basketball. I'm sure you've been asked that.
Always.
A million times.
Always. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. That's the other piece about getting into the broader world. Like one of the projects I had to work on in grad school was doing some work over in rural India. Working with smallholder farmers in India, and you get out in the broader world, and like back in North Dakota, we're a bunch of big Germans, Norwegians, right? It's just that kind of hardy stock, the people that live in the frozen north. And so I didn't feel that like I'm tall, right? I'm 6'7" or whatever, but like so I'm tall for there, but I didn't feel as big as when I got out to the East Coast and then out to India. It's like, I'm a bit of an anomaly out here.
Yes, you're very tall. And folks, it just means you can change light bulbs without ladders. That's all that means.
Right. Top shelf stuff. That's all I'm good for, really. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so you're at Lando Lakes, Turturra. So explain, is it one company, two companies together? Like what? Explain. I wasn't sure about things. Of course, we've heard of Lando Lakes. We all heard that.
Yeah.
But what is the companies that you're working for?
Man, I tell you, I barely figured that out once I started working here. It was a little bit to kind of unpack. So I'll give you the flyover because this is just a super cool organization.
Okay.
So Land O'Lakes is a 100-year-old farmer-owned cooperative, just turned 100 last year. Pretty cool. So started out as a dairy cooperative, and that's what everybody kind of knows is the dairy brand side of the business, right? So member-owned cooperative system, that just means that the farmers that we help take their milk and milk byproducts to market, they in turn own this enterprise, and it's a way for them to collectively pool resources, and then they are our shareholders. So some of our member owners are the dairy members, but then we have this whole other side of the business that involves the full agricultural cooperative system. So, your local ag co-op that sells seed and crop nutrients and helps you take your grain to market, the grain elevator in your backyard. We actually work with about 1,000 of those ag cooperatives around the country through our Winfield United side of the business, which they are like a crop inputs distribution business, and they reach about half of the harvested acres in the United States. So a heavy focus on row crop ag, but a massive footprint. Didn't even realize this when I took the job here at Turturra.
Never knew that either. That's interesting.
You're right. Yeah, it's huge. And then the third business unit for us is Purina Animal Feed. So there's a split for the Purina brand. So you've got Purina Pet Food. That's Nestle Purina, nothing to do with Land O'Lakes. So if it barks or meows, that's Nestle Purina. And then if it moos, clucks, neighs, all that other stuff, and actually zoo animals, randomly enough, that's Purina here at Land O'Lakes. We serve upper 90% of all zoo animals that you're eating Purina. I know, right? It's a random fun fact.
Okay.
But then getting to the actual question, Turturra then is the fourth business unit here at Land O'Lakes. We are a wholly owned subsidiary, so it's actually Turturra LLC. So we're kind of our own business unit. So we work to support our farmer member owners, our cooperative member owners, our dairy member owners, but also people outside, farmers totally outside the Land O'Lakes network as well, because we are this independent entity within this overall enterprise. So then we work in sustainable agriculture. So we're the sustainability business, and we're just helping farmers navigate this new frontier of data and integration with downstream companies that are using these agricultural crops as the inputs to their end products. And now all these big companies are making environmental commitments and environmental goals. Well, one thing that you do with that is you need to track the data to understand what your footprint actually is. And then as soon as you know what your footprint is, what do? You work on it, right? You try and make that better. And that's really where we come in materially, is working with the farmers that we serve and saying, hey, here's a marketable opportunity that you can engage with downstream consumers of your products and start to connect the dots of your environmental impact as a farmer and what they're trying to accomplish as a corporation. So that's where we can kind of connect both sides of that agricultural value chain and start tying it together. It's challenging, to say the least, to translate between those two audiences.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's really exciting to me that there's a market mechanism evolving to put a dollar amount on those environmental outcomes and start to make it something transactable and something that's real and tangible, both on the farm and at the corporate level.
Yeah, you hit several things we need to unpack. That's really interesting, and that is corporate versus actual out there in the fields. The two different things going on there. Also, environmental versus dollars and cents. We all know it all comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, this is kind of how that works. I mean, that's how it works. It's a business. But also our environment, like I said earlier, is completely changing, and we need to. There's things we need to put in place so we can be sustainable for the next 15, 20, 50 years. I mean, we got to do this. But I understand also companies are going to the bottom line. So tell us, how can we do this where it's cost effective, right? And also where it actually works, and also we can make money. I mean, like it's probably several different components there, isn't there, to that?
Yeah.
It's just I don't know how you do that. But you can tell us a little bit how you do that. I mean, just saying it's like you're in two worlds again. Isn't that funny? Your life is kind of like that, isn't it? Where you're in kind of several worlds, trying to navigate and be the conduit to both, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that really nails it. I probably haven't thought about it in exactly those terms. But my favorite thing in the world is to just translate amongst different audiences. So to take these potentially really complex ideas of like what's happening in the soil microbiome, and why does somebody that's sitting in a sustainability office in some, corporate headquarters somewhere, why do they care? Right. And like tying those things together, I just have a lot of fun with it. And it's fun to come from kind of that agricultural background where that authenticity matters. And that's what I see at Land O'Lakes and Turturra as an organization, is these are real farm people, like a lot of upper leadership at the whole Land O'Lakes Corp. I mean, these are people doing really intense full-time jobs, and they're farmers at the same time. They actually have family farms that they're still actively working on in some of these roles. So it's pretty cool.
I was talking about on one of my shows about farming, and it turns out the PR person who got me my last guest, do I have her book here? She's a great, I don't have her book over here with me. I don't, it's not over here, but the PR person, their family owns a farm here in California. She was like, I didn't know you did shows like this. I have a farm too. And I was like, but we do full-time PR and we're farming. I'm like, that's just crazy. I understand. I mean, for me, just going outside watering my plants in my giant yard here in LA, I get tired. Then I gotta go to work. I mean, that's just I joke, of course. Actually, is it one of your founders or CEOs female or somebody up?
Yeah. CEO of the company, Beth Ford. She's an absolutely incredible human being. It's fun every time we get to hear her speak, and she is really, really passionate about the space. So she's a great leader for us, both out in the farm community and then really in the corporate sphere. And there again, it's kind of that one foot in both worlds, right? Where she's connecting with major, multinational corporate leaders and really driving partnerships that drive us into the future of really where agriculture is headed. So it's a 100-year-old cooperative, and it's kind of fun because we're not thinking about like as much about what's the next quarter performance on a publicly traded company, right? Like what's that going to do to our stock price? We're owned by farmers. So we're thinking about the next 10, the next 20, next 100 years as far as where agriculture is going. So it's great because then Beth Ford and the leaders here, they can have the vision to invest in things like Turturra and in the sustainability technologies and things like that will help our farmers be relevant and engaged with where the market's headed long term. And it's just really great to see that long term perspective. I find that really kind of enriching because so much about the corporate sphere. It's very short term. What's that next budget number going to be? And we kind of lose sight of the long-term outcomes.
Yes, we can take care of things in a long term. They can also take care of things in the short term too. It can work, and there's times it can work. So we have regenerative ag services, we have carbon markets, all related. We want healthier soil, all that kind of stuff, and data. So let's talk about that. So let's tell what's going on, what the latest things are going on. I had read something about, I'm going to mention this, something about Article 6, something going on with that. And also, so let's talk about that. So what's going on with these carbon markets and regenerative soil and all this good soil, convenient soil and data and all that? Let's start talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. I love getting into this stuff. One big asterisk that I need to put behind anything that I say is I am not an expert on many of these topics, but I know enough to be dangerous and how it's relevant to the farmers that we serve. So I'll say,
we're having a discussion. I'll probably get more people on the show. We'll having a discussion because it is in the news these days. And I saw the article we were talking about it. So that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. No, it's a really exciting advancement. So Article 6 would be one of the main things that was negotiated at the latest, the COP26, a big intergovernmental panel on climate change. And Article 6 really addressed some of the major issues that I think were in the way of carbon markets getting off the ground. And it talked about, this is where this topic that I find extremely exciting can verge on getting really boring really quick because it's all accounting rules, right?
Yes.
So a lot of the things that make this stuff work, though, it's the rigor of how we account for it. Because if you have sort of a leakage or loose accounting around the greenhouse gas implications and therefore the environmental implications, pretty soon you're not having the impact that you thought you were, right? So these markets, they need that credibility, they need that certainty, and they need that accounting rigor to be able to account for that. So Article 6 largely deals with kind of how internationally these markets can play together. So one of the big challenges that was sort of ill-defined prior to this latest gathering of the minds on this subject was how an activity that happens in one country translates into what happens in another country. So like if we have something that's produced here in the United States, obviously we export a ton of our agricultural goods, but many other goods, and we're importing things from other countries. So like, how do you do the greenhouse gas implication accounting for those things? So like if the US invests in something that has a positive environmental outcome here in the US, but then some company overseas is also co-investing. So maybe you have a public-private investment issue or something like that. So what they did is they clarified some of the issues around accounting to make sure we can limit double counting, but also we can provide some confidence in these evolving carbon markets to say, okay, there are rules in place that can account for this. So we can say how we appropriately split this between host countries in terms of what impact they're having for their Paris Climate Agreement commitments, and also then on the private marketplace, what different private companies can claim based on their investment in environmental activities. Yeah.
How is it, let's relate it now to the states. How is it with the states? Are the states that much different in terms of laws, regulations, things like that? Is it very different in the states? Like, is like certain states are some one way, or is it all pretty uniform? I just know California. I know a few other places, but I don't know all over the country.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, taking it at kind of a global level, we have a few what we call regulatory or compliance carbon markets. So that'd be like the EU, right over in Europe. They've had something going on for a while where this is a regulatory and a compliance market. So there's actual statutes in place, legal statutes that define kind of your operating engagements. In the US, historically, that pretty much has been like California and on the West Coast. And you see kind of the same thing in Canada. It's been a little bit fractured, and there's some ties between what's happened in the US and Canada in terms of the rules around these markets. And then we see other markets that have been codified around like renewable energy certificates and what's happened in the energy sphere. But when it comes to like the voluntary carbon marketplace, and that's where agriculture in the US largely is today, it's a purely voluntary marketplace. So it's voluntary commitments that are being made by the corporations that are investing, voluntary engagement by the farmers. So there isn't a regulatory framework for that. So to your point, yeah, it varies state by state, and there's even implications here in the Midwest for what happens in California, like things like low carbon fuel standards, right? So we've got low carbon fuel standards around ethanol. A lot of ethanol is produced in the Midwest where the corn is grown, and then if it's produced efficiently in a way that's attractive to the low carbon fuel market, that stuff will get shipped out to California, where there's a marketplace to incentivize the carbon footprint or carbon intensity of that fuel stock. Yeah, so like a cool frontier there that I'm really excited about, and kind of taking this down a rabbit hole, but it's really personal.
I love it. This is why I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So low carbon fuel standards, one thing that's been frustrating for me as an ag professional is low carbon fuel standards have been largely focused around sort of the ethanol production facility, right? What kind of energy are you using in your production facility? How efficient are you being with the feedstock? And feedstock in this case would be like the corn, with your raw feedstock for the production that goes into the facility. But largely, low carbon fuel standards have not allowed for what we call differentiated feedstock. So to say, Reinke Farms is different than Johnson Farms in terms of how we raised our corn. And anybody that knows agriculture, you could be neighboring farms in exactly the same environment with totally different environmental footprints, totally different production processes, right? And it's a little bit historically, we haven't had probably the technological processes in place to really do a good job of monitoring those different practices. Environmental modeling is incredibly complex and difficult. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, Turturra is in the business of is doing some of that environmental modeling. But that's where the low carbon fuel standards, even though maybe the better part of half of the carbon intensity or the carbon footprint, the carbon intensity score of that gallon of ethanol comes from the feedstock, they were basically saying corn is corn, right? And not truly differentiating. So I think that new frontier is coming where they're starting to see there's great data out there in a way that there wasn't 10 years ago. There's great technology out there in a way that there wasn't 10 years ago to monitor this stuff and really credibly quantify it. So now it's just incredible to see the things that technology unlocks in terms of these markets. And then that low carbon fuel standard market, frankly, from a farmer perspective, is potentially a lot more lucrative than the standard carbon marketplace. It's just a different mechanism, but it's ultimately accomplishing the same thing. It's just monetizing environmental impacts in a positive way.
You also talk about how in America it is very much voluntary. I never thought about it that way, but it is, right? It really very much is. And we have foundations, we have things set up, certain parts of insurance companies have certain sections that deal with, pretty good giving backing things to make practices better. And do you see, as you're out there doing this, do you see that it's getting more and more popular to start backing up these kind of carbon market practices and sustainability and making sure that things are running smoother? Are we getting more and more? Is it getting better?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of traction. It's been pretty incredible just to see the conversation shift in the Midwest, where, sustainability as a term in the world of agriculture can get you some pretty mixed responses because, like half the time in sustainability, if somebody comes to talk to you on your farm about sustainability, it's to point a finger and say, hey, you're doing bad things to the environment. You're not being sustainable. And some academic that has never set foot on a farm is going to tell them how to farm. It's not well received. So I think, kind of to your point, it's a little bit the American way to be voluntary and also extremely independent, bordering on a little stubborn. Yes. But
you're answering that perfectly, because that's what I want to know, because I've met, trust me, I've worked with a lot of farmers in the insurance and education side, and great folks, but a lot of them were like, we've been doing it this way for this long, Nick. So I don't know what you're talking about. You want me to do this and look into this, and I've been doing it, but I know what I'm doing. And don't tell me I'm doing wrong.
Don't tell me what to do.
Right. Yeah. So yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that you must come across that, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, in difficult conversations are where the real insights happen, right? And those are the fun conversations to lean into. So the thing that's been exciting to me of late is messaging in the broader world, like as the world continues to talk about these things and it makes it more into the mainstream conversation, it becomes this thing that you kind of can't ignore as an emerging trend. And that really broad level marketing, messaging, news, I haven't historically put that much stock in it until I've seen how much that shifted the conversation on farm. So just because of this level of awareness, But then it's this combination of the global awareness of where the marketplace is headed that farmers are paying attention to, and then some local anecdotal direct experience with the impacts of climate change, where we're starting to feel the effects in a real way, right? We're getting more intense rainfall events, most severe drought out there in California.
I trust. Oh God, yes, I know.
Yeah, right. So things like that, like farmers are starting to get proof points that they can directly relate to, right? So now you get to this point where, all right, we can debate till we're blue in the face what caused climate change, what is causing climate change. I mean, it's a little bit hard to debate the majority scientific consensus, but that's a battle I don't need to fight anymore.
Yes.
Because I've got a financial case for you. I've got a soil health and productivity case for you. Farmers are proud to be good stewards of the land. They want to be increasing the value of that land for future generations, right? And why not pay attention to the latest and greatest science that says, hey, you know what? If you disturb that soil a little bit less, if you get a little bit more efficient with the way that you manage your nutrients, you're actually going to build up your soil health over time. You're building your soil savings account, if you will, that makes you more resilient to extreme rainfall events. It makes you more resilient to drought because you're changing the substructure and the performance of that soil based on your management practices. And, ultimately the widespread science just kind of wasn't there on that with the growth of industrial production agriculture over the last, 50, 60 odd years. So farmers are good at adapting to good science that makes them more profitable and more efficient with their resources. And that's exactly what this is it's the new frontier of sort of farm efficiency being bolstered now by the global conversation around environmental impacts.
Well, I try to tell people, the soil is the money.
Yeah.
Yes. It's which I was trying to say, because somebody was like, no, the crops are the money. I go, no. I'm like, that can help you get money. I'm saying, if you don't have good soil, then it's like we say here in this business, they on a page, they on the stage. If you don't have good writing for a show or for a play or for a movie, then no one can act it, and then no one can actually make money. I mean, I guess literally the foundation is the soil, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in a way, it's almost like the soil is your production facility, right?
Yes.
And if you enable the microbial life to unlock all the power to turn that mineralized nutrient into something that's bioavailable to the plant and make sure that water is available, what you're doing is you're basically optimizing your resource flow inside that factory of your soil, right? So you can produce more of that end good because your resources are flowing more efficiently. All your workers are optimized, kind of your little microbial workers down in the soil are supporting the plant growth and ultimately creating more efficient production. So you're exactly right. I mean, the soil is really that's the medium, and historically it's been viewed from a more physical and chemical process. And it has a parallel with the medical industry as well, right? Like, let's just strip it down to its base case and say, okay, we need nutrients and we want to eliminate all pests that could get in the way of our production.
Right. Yes.
And you do this and you totally miss the rich nature of, like, in the new frontier of more holistic approaches to medicine. You need to understand what's happening in your biome, right? Like, you get rid of all the bad bacteria by taking broad spectrum antibiotics, but you're getting rid of the good stuff too. And everybody's experienced that when you take some nasty antibiotics and your body doesn't like it for a little while, right? It's the same thing when you sterilize the soil. We should work within the ecosystem and take advantage of all of the probiotic type things that happen in the soil and the positive microbial life that's evolved over many millennia to be a really, really efficient system. And of course, that's the human way, right? To come in and think we know better than hundreds of millions of years of planetary evolution. Yeah,
we do. I mean, seriously, it's something that like I say, even all the way down to house plants. I always tell people, make sure the soil is good. Make sure it's good. It's healthy, and your plants will grow, and your trees will grow. I have loquat trees. I have nectarine and avocado and to me, they're like, your stuff just grows. I'm like, I know, I take care of it. I mean, like, I literally take care of it. And in California, and in Southern California especially, it's been very hard over the years because of our water situation. Recently, we had some rain. I think I cried when I saw the rain. I'm like, there's rain. My garden just like opened up all of a sudden. It was great. But like, we have it tough out here. But then I also hear about over rain, over flooding, over or over freezing in some parts of the country of crops. I mean, that stuff is. I mean, when things get frozen, that's tough. I mean, it's extremes, folks. It's on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And where it's a really fun challenge to me to translate some of the things that you're talking about on that very localized sort of garden type level. And now we talk about operating on thousands, millions of acres of really, really efficient farmland production. And as much as, a lot of farmers would like to, they can't do what you're doing with your trees, James, and whisper sweet nothings to them and give them your love every day so that they can reflect that back, right? Because plants actually respond to that, which is the wildest thing to me. But yeah, we can't be walking, hundreds of acres of cornfields and telling each plant how much we love them. So
you're worth it. You're worth it. You're worth it. You can't do that. Yes, you can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we do it, and do it in a way that's efficient, right? Because some of the changes that we're talking about, they can be more resource intensive in terms of just, say you want to add a cover crop is one of the best things you could do for your soil. So you add a cover crop and now you're raising 2 crops in a growing season as opposed to 1. And when you go and plant in that, you're not planting into this perfectly tilled garden seed bed that, is just totally consistent. You're planting into new biomass. And that's just a new kind of challenge for a farmer to have is, okay, how do I set a planter? Like I'm used to setting it in nice, perfect, consistent, soft soil. Now I got to set it to be bouncing over corn stalks and still give me a consistent seed depth. So I get a good germination and soil seed contact and all that stuff. So, I mean, to start to manage for that at a massive scale, it's no wonder that production agriculture is a little bit slow to adapt to these things because they're difficult. It's a different way to manage the farm.
I'm glad you said it because also, I don't want people thinking I'm just trying to change everything and just do it. But we know that there are systems that have been put in place for hundreds of years for some places that handle mass production. So I want to say I understand that. I want to make sure I understand that and that this stuff is still good. Carbon markets are still good. Just that you may have to take a little longer to, I guess, turn on. I'm trying to find the words like how to adapt to these newer things to help you. Because I know there's some folks that's literally it's your bread and butter. It's your life. You have it set up in a way that really works for you. But we also know that it may still be actually not helping the environment. So, am I saying that right? I think I'm saying it right.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And this is one of my favorite topics on this whole conversation is it's basically the diffusion of innovations or, innovation adoption curve and all that kind of stuff, right?
Get the words out.
So
the words.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right that's one of the big challenges in this space. And, we also have to recognize just kind of not just the sociological components of, there's some folks that like they'll buy the new iPhone before it's even out, right? And then you got the other folks that will be right on the heels of them, watching them saying, hey, how do you like it? Okay, cool. I'm going to be the next first person to buy it. And then you got the rest. It's like, yeah, I'll give it a year and see if it works. And then, I'll be kind of that kind of early majority, the front half of the curve. Yes. And then you got the late majority, which is probably where my dad, I would say, lives on the farm. Is he's like, you know what? Yeah, you guys, I'll give you some time to figure it out. And when we start seeing that a lot of people have adopted it, and it's like, oh, okay, this is starting to make sense to me. Now I'll take a chance on it. So you've got that kind of sociological, just where does that individual farm personality fit? Because it's not, we talk about farmers like they're one totally homogenous group.
That's right. We're not yet. There's not one swath.
Yeah.
They're all different. That's why I always be glad you said that.
Yeah, exactly. But then the other piece is just when you look at going back to the ag banking and crop insurance and things like that, a lot of the systems that have evolved to support farmers actually make it a little bit difficult for them to change sometimes, right? If I want to change my crop rotation, introduce a new crop, if I don't have a history for that with my crop insurance, that's actually a more risky proposition from a guaranteed income standpoint to add a new crop when I've boosted my yields on corn and soybeans and I know I'm going to be okay there.
Right.
And then, on the banking side of things, like typical operating loans for most farmers, it's a single year look, right? How profitable you're going to be this year. Here's how much money you can borrow and we trust you to pay it back. So when you talk about switching over to regenerative ag, that financial conversation would go something like, hey, I think I'm going to do something risky this year and I might lose a little bit of money compared to what I would have done otherwise. And then I think it'll get a little bit better next year, but I think it'll really get better in the next 3 to 5 years. So Mr. Banker, you want to sign up for that one? The answer is not yes a lot of times.
The answer is like, no.
Yeah, no. They don't keep doing what you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there are all these reinforcing systems. So it's not just, a stubborn old farmer, I'm going to do what I know, but it's also reinforcing systems that make it hard for them to break out of it. So a lot of the folks that go really aggressive into regenerative agricultural practices, they fit kind of one of a couple of profiles. One profile is the farm was in financial trouble and there was no choice but to make a change. Some of the real regenerative ag heroes out there, like that's their story, right? Back against the wall, got to cut my inputs, got to do something different. This ain't working. And then they go and change. And then the flip side is farmers that have the financial freedom to experiment and take a little bit more risk, right? And all the guys in the middle, which is representative of the majority of your family farms, it's just a tight, low margin business that to introduce any additional risk. And that's where the carbon market can help offset that risk. That's what I get really excited about, is now we've got another financial mechanism that maybe just helps tip the scale a little bit in favor of being willing to make a change.
Well, because so you're telling us you can all the analysis you find in carbon market stuff, it can be very specific to the farm, right? It's very specific. So you can have all this analysis, all this data, all this kind of for each farm that's specific to them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right down to a subfield level, right? Like farming these days is incredibly precise. So we can even do environmental modeling down to, the acre and sub-acre level in some cases, and that's the beauty of it too, right? When you think about optimizing a system, one way to optimize it is optimizing your corn production practices across the farm. Another way to optimize it is to look at a subfield level and say, these acres over here are really, really productive with this production system. These acres over here, oh geez, I haven't made money on those in 10 years. And then you start to raise the question, all right, would I actually be making more money on my farm if those acres were maybe I partner up with some, Pheasants Forever or something like that, and that becomes habitat, and that becomes a good thing for your pollinator habitat as well as your wildlife habitat. And you're putting those acres into their most productive possible use, which is actually native ground, right? And that's a complicated conversation to have because most farmers don't like the idea of taking acres out of production. But if you show them a way to understand, okay, now with the advanced environmental modeling and productivity and profitability modeling we can do, we can say, well, yeah, actually, like these are losing you money. Why keep farming them? Yeah.
Well, it's almost like we have nothing to lose this. And this one, because if this area is not making you any money anyway, then might as well try something different that could possibly make you money.
Right. And that's how we move the conversation with the environmentalist over to the same side of the desk as the farmer, as opposed to that being more of an adversarial relationship, which I think it has been historically because it's treated like a binary, right? Yeah.
I think that's the thing. It's like, I'm all about, again, I'm in a business also where we're always trying to grow in the entertainment business. And we're thinking about, for us, it's always seasons or things where I was like, okay, the fall season, the winter season, like I always tell people, so you got to think about this show could be really good. It may not hit right away, but it could find an audience later and really hit later, which just happens sometimes. An event happens, all of a sudden the show's everywhere. So it's like you got to think ahead of time. And farmers, same thing. It's like if this little piece of property is not really working for you, what else can you turn it into that can actually make you something possible? And again, it may not happen this first year. You got to hold out, but in 2 years, it can be this huge thing you never knew was going to happen. And you're like, wow, I had no idea. Great, and it's fun. But it's hard to look. I know at psychology, so you talk sociology, going to the psychology of things, a lot of folks are hard to look at the future. It's because they can't touch it. The future is this unknown beast that's just like, well, anything can happen in the future. Aliens can come tomorrow, and that's it. That kind of thing. I'm being funny, but like, it's one of those psychological things where you're thinking about the future means tomorrow, it means next week, it means whatever schedule you have for that harvest. That's all you're thinking about. You're not thinking about 5 years from now where you could have 10 different things going on at the same time. It's wonderful because you made some changes. I know it's just hard psychologically to think that way.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. You're kind of bound to whatever time horizon you can accurately envision, right? Yeah.
Got it. Nick, I love talking to you. You have to come back on the show again. This is great. I mean, I would go on forever, but so I've been 40-something minutes. They'll be like, why are you talking forever? But no, thank you. So this is very interesting. And I thought of some things I never thought of before. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Anytime. Really, really love to continue the conversation.
Yes, we love to continue the conversation. Nick Reinke, he is with Lando Lakes Turturra. He's doing that over there. If anyone wants to contact you business-wise, where can they find you?
Yeah, TruterraAg.com. And comically enough, if you drop an email in there, there's a pretty good chance I'm actually the guy responding to it. We're a pretty small team. Yeah, we're a small startup team. So you ask me a good nerdy enough question, and I'll be on it. Yeah.
It's so funny. Yes, that's great. And I'm James Lott Jr. Of course, this is A Lot Beneath the Soil. We're on every week. You can follow us on any streaming service, of course, out there, which is Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, everywhere. Just a lot. That's with 2 T's, like my last name. A Lot Beneath the Soil, because I am punny like that. And I'm also on my YouTube channel, JLJ Media, which have over 45 shows from Star Wars to soap operas and everything in between. Like, subscribe, follow, check that out. Pass this actually on. If you hear this or see this, wherever you find it, and you need to pass it on to somebody else needs to hear it, please do that. Share. Sharing is caring, right? We always say. So please do that. We want to get this out to everybody out there, especially who are in the farm and ag business. If you don't know about this or haven't heard about this or just are even curious, please. And if you have any questions, and you're afraid to talk to him, you can contact me. I will connect you guys. It's no big deal. But we want to make sure we service as much of the community as we can, right, Nick? We'll get everybody on board.
Absolutely.
So everybody have a great day and plant something. See you next time.